I pulled a bunch of router bits out of the drawer back there and put them on the table to talk about. But I realized I had some what do you call it? Cordless routers behind me that you've been looking at all this time. And they're these wooden things. These are actually planes with molding cutters on them. And this is actually called a router plane. It's a hand-drawn tool that has a single tooth, and it routes the bottom of a slot clean. So it predates our modern routers and router bits. And so did these wooden planes. I mean, look at that. That has a nice large cove there. It's about at least, that's almost an inch radius, but it's not quite. I'm sorry, a ½ inch radius. And then, but that's a nice full cove. And then I have another one here it's a good round over. And the shape of the sole here, if you're not familiar with these early wooden molding planes, is the same as the grind on the blade. So you can see that blade there.
Here.
See that?
Yeah.
And then here's one that cuts a cove. I mean, look at that. So these two are the opposite. This is a larger sweeping cove. But, you know, you can mold wood with that. And then here's one that's more of a 1/4 inch bead. This is like the classic kind of bead board that you might see where you just have the bead and you have maybe a shiplap joint on wainscoting or something like that. Mm. And in fact, a friend of mine who had a period home near here borrowed, I don't know if it was that particular one, but I let him borrow it and showed him how, tuned it up. And he actually hand planed a lot of the edges of his beadboard for his wainscoting. But here it is. I haven't tuned it up since. It doesn't look great, but I think it'll work on this pine. The way we use it, just to show you quickly, is we just bring it on here. You didn't expect to see this with all these router bits. And I'll just make a little pass and see now it's starting to just take that first little tooth. You don't have to set it too heavy. But it's kind of fun because it just takes that and then now it's going to start shaping the bead. So we'll get the full round over of the bead, and there it is. That's it. So isn't that cool? No dust, no plugging anything in. We got a beautiful 1/4 inch bead right there. So see, that is replaced by now the modern beads. Now this is a much larger one. I had one smaller. I don't know what happened. So we make this kind of cut modern ways using a router bit like this. Man, it sure is fun though. If you have an opportunity to try out one of those planes, it's great when you're working with agreeable wood and you're not trying to take off too much. However, these router planes, molding planes, have a limitation. They have trouble going around corners and going around curves and things. They can go across the grain a lot, but it's more problematic. But they don't work well on curved surfaces unless they're specifically designed for that. So you've kind of got some limitation. You're limited to the straight line, basically. However, we are not limited to the straight line with modern router bits. So I have a drawer full here, and I took a bunch of them out here to show you some of the various ones we're dealing with here. Now, probably the most common one that you're familiar with is a flush cutting router bit. This is a 1/2 inch shank, meaning the part that goes into your router is a 1/2 inch diameter. I'd prefer, if possible, to always use a 1/2 inch because it just gives you more stability and there's less likelihood of vibration. It just feels safer too. So if you can, size up to the 1/2 inch shank. And then this one also has a 1/2 inch cutter diameter with a bearing. And the bearing, when I say flush cut, if you're not familiar with that, the bearing's in perfect plane with the cutting edge of this router bit. So when it rides against whatever surface you're riding against, that cutter is going to cut in perfect plane with whatever surface that is. Okay. All right, so here's a larger flush cut routing bit, which is kind of dinged up from hitting, man, I've got some chips on that. This is no longer in service. But you can see it's a larger, longer cutting surface. It's 2 inches long. It's 3/4 inch diameter here, yet I still have the 1/2 inch shank, which gives you that stability. So another flush cutting router bit. Now, this mounts in a router table quite well, and you're going to have your guide material on the top if you're using that flush route. In this case, I've got the same bit, really. It's a 3/4 inch diameter, 2 inch cutting length, but the bearing is on the bottom. So in this case, you would have your pattern would be riding along the bottom, and you would be, this is more for pattern routing. This might be used more for trimming something that's proud of the surface. But this one's a little more shaky to use because the blade is sticking up above the work a little bit. So you got to be careful, follow all your safety requirements and on your manuals and your tools. All right, so that's a flush cut with the bottom bearing. Here's another one, the same, just a shorter guy. And the shorter ones, I feel a little safer with them because you just don't have as much out of the router. So those are straight cutters. The cutting surface is straight. But here we've got one, whoops, well, time to sharpen those again. I dropped it because this thing's heavy. I mean, that's 1.5 inches diameter here, this one. And this has a cutting angle to the cutter, if you notice. And then the next one is angled the other way. So when this is spinning, you're getting a dual kind of action. Some of them actually have like a spiraling to them, but this is considered to be a compression cutting dual bearing. So we've got the bearing on the top and the bottom. So all the best things, the best world of these. So I've still got a 2 inch cutting height surface, but I've got the advantage of being able to use the top or the bottom, and I have the skewed cutting blades, which leaves a finer surface, less likely to tear out. So there you have it. There's my flush cutting series. Now they come in all kinds of sizes and shapes. I mean, not so much shapes, but lengths and the bearing on top and bottom. And that's it for the straight cutters. Now, I want to show you another straight kind of cutter, but this one is used typically with a plunge router because you're going to be, this bit's going to be spinning. This happens to be a spiral cut, solid carbide, and another 1/2 inch shank, and it's a 1/2 inch diameter cutter. This one's pretty dull. I've used it, I can't remember what I used it on, and it plunges straight into the wood. Now, when you're plunging, this router bit is spinning clockwise as you look down at it, okay? So it's going to be spinning like this. So you can see the cutting edges are right here, really sharp, spinning in here. So it's cutting. Now, as you see that spiral, in which direction is it pushing the chips after it cuts? So it's spinning this way. You can see the angle is kind of pushing them down, okay? So this is called a down cut. So it's a spiral down cut. And why would you want a down cut? Because you don't want to tear out on the surface, or you have a particular reason for wanting to push the shavings down. Maybe you've got a vacuum below or whatever. So the shearing action, though, gives you a cleaner, like a easier entry into the wood as well. Now check this one out. This is almost the exact same blade. It's got a longer cutting surface, the same length, but it's a 1/2 inch shank, 1/2 inch diameter. But now let's turn this one. So if we're looking down on this, look at the cutting angle. The cutting angle here was the opposite. It sloped down. This one, it's coming up. So as I turn, you can see it's spiraling upward. This is an upcut. So when you plunge into the wood, the shavings are coming up. So why would you want that? In this case, you have the potential of tearing out, but you know, for going in and cutting mortises, it's preferable to have an upcut. It will release the shavings more easily. All right, so there you have it. Downcut, upcut with two classic pieces. So I'm going to use the same piece. Let's bring it around. Let me show you. I'm going to gear up here, put on my glasses. We'll just do a quick plunge. This is set up with a spiral. I don't know if you can see it in there, but it's an upcut, 3/8 inch, solid carbide. Now, I didn't tell you about the relative prices here. This baby is not super fancy. This was from Tool Masters. So you can get solid carbide cutters like this for around $30. And I've got links to, I've got a bunch of links with this video, but you're going to see one for 1/2 inch spiral and then one for this one. This is an Amana. It's, I can't tell you, it's ground so beautifully. It's like a double sharpened edge. It's just a beautiful bit. This one is essentially the same as that other one, but instead of being $30, it's $98 for one bit. But these are also used quite commonly on CNC machines. So you can use it in the router or in a CNC. So this is made to last, has a beautiful shearing cut. Now, this is the kind of bit that you get when you have the multi-router from Woodpeckers that I made the outdoor bench with. So the bits that they sent to me for that, with that, are Amana CNC worthy. Nice. And that's what I have in here. I have a 3/8 upcut Amana CNC. I'm just going to do a plunge here. So I'll show you the plunge. I got it set for about a 3/4 inch plunge, but I'll make it in a couple passes. I'm not following any guidelines right here. I just want to show you the action. If I was, I would just go just to the line and then come back. Get my hearing protection. Here we go. All right, see all that dust right up on top? That was coming up and out. So pretty effective cut. If I had a vacuum hooked up to this, it would have come out quite easily, but I have a vacuum over here. And so you can see how clean this cut is. Right there. I had a little bobble because of the awkward position I was at the beginning. But, you know, you could have a double guide. So there you see how easy it is to make a nice plunge with an upcut. Now, you got to make sure that these are secure in your router. Because if you think about it, as it's pulling the chips up, it actually is exerting a force on the bit as it's cutting to pull the bit down out of your router, okay? So you don't want a bit to come out of your router as it's going 22,000 RPMs, okay? You don't want that to happen. So make sure it's tight in the collet. Practice all your safety precautions, all right? The straight cutters, that's pretty much there. I do have, sometimes I'll use these small cutters. So this is a solid carbide 1/8 inch cutter, and this is pretty inexpensive. It's a straight cut, but because it's doing so little, it's not a big deal. And I use this to cut that 1/8 inch line, the groove for that I plunged in. For the edge, I used a rabbiting bit like this. So you can get these rabbiting bits that will cut in on this edge. And this is an 1/8 inch offset bearing. So what's cool is these little rabbiting sets come with the one bit and then a series of bearings of all different shapes. So you'll get one that's exactly the same size, like this, so you can have a flush cut bearing. But then this is an 1/8 down, and then they do even have a 1/16 with this. I have a link to this CMT. This is the CMT, and then there's also a link to another version. I don't know if it's white side or who I have, but the good ones are, guys have already mentioned them. The white side, the Amana, CMT,
LCS.
Freud is good. MLCS.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure where those come from, but some of the imported ones are, when you see the prices are dirt cheap, watch out, because, I mean, yeah, maybe it'll work, but some of them are very clumsy, and some are really dangerous that I've had. So be careful, especially you don't want to buy the big heavy bits imported. They can be shaky. All right, so this is my 1/8 inch. I just bought, I'm going to try this out. This is a 3/32 straight cutting bit, and it's a spiral cut. It's a down cut, so it's going to cut and leave a really clean surface. You follow me on that? Mm-hmm. And so I got to thinking that line was a little wide. I want to go with a 3/32 next time. This corner, even though it's only 3/32, it looks like an 1/8, and so it looks better in balance that way. But when you look straight down on it, I don't know, it's a little heavy-handed there. And then so I've got the 3/32, and then I've got here a 1/16. Neither of these have been tried out yet. So I haven't, so you could really cut a line there. Now I know there's hand tools that you can scratch in the 16th. Garrett Hack gave us a great demonstration of that at the last Epic weekend. And so that's a pleasure to do as well. But if you've got a setup, there are little mini routers like Dremel supports that guitar makers use to route. And quite often you use little bits like this. And you can find them. Just look, you can search on Amazon for this solid carbide typically. And you can get these really small sizes. So there you go. So those are pretty much the straight ones. Then you get into one of the most common bits to use, as I just demonstrated with the wooden plane, are roundover style bits. So use those a lot. And I've got, look at this, I've got a series of roundovers here. I didn't realize I had a set like this. They're all bought at different times from different makers. But I've got an 1/8 inch here. I use this. Look at, on this bed rail. On the bed rails, I like an 1/8 inch roundover. 16th, not quite enough. The 1/8 is soft because you're going to be, hitting your leg on that, whatever. So that typically, bed rails, I put an 1/8 inch roundover. That's one of the only times. Most furniture, you don't want to round over that heavy. Then I've got a 3/16, quarter, 3/8, half, 5/8, 3/4. And then I think this is a...
Who approved all these purchases?
1.5 inches. So this combination, this is a 1/2 inch cove and my 1/2 inch roundover. This combination fits into each other. And this is what I use for a a rule joint, like where you have a drop leaf table. And you're going to have a little rule joint in there. We're going to have a table like that coming up. There is this type of bit. They actually call it a Queen Anne bit. And I think it was Infinity Tool had one. I have a link on there to one. Not this one. This was from a company called Price Cutter. I couldn't find it available anymore. It's an imported bit, but it's really essentially the same bit. But I really like this because the radius of this cutter is 1.5 inches. So it's like you get the big radius here, but you can put softer kind of pillowing on surfaces with this type of bit. So you can find that in the
Michael's noticing
list.
a little green tape on one of the bits. Do you know why you have that on there?
Oh yeah, sorry, Michael. Yeah. So this bearing is there for an 1/8 inch offset. And I had the 1/8 inch offset, and then I had another bearing that would give me a 1/16. But this is where I wanted a 3/32. Sound like a nerd, right? Okay, I am a nerd.
You're already clued in on that one, huh?
So look, we got a 3/32 line. I like putting that kind of line in there. So this is actually custom made to cut a 3/32 rabbet. It'll plunge in, do that cut. And all I did was just wrap a little green tape around until it got heavy enough, and I tested it just measuring till I had the offset. So this is a custom bearing. So
Claude called it.
yeah. Yeah, I think I've mentioned that once or twice before. But anyway, you can also have chamfer bearings like this instead of roundovers, but I don't honestly use this that much. If I have a chamfer, I'll usually rip it on the table saw or do it quickly by hand with a spoke shave. But there are times when it's worthwhile to do a lot of chamfering. And then you have your decorative kind of more like, this is more 18th century Chippendale type moldings where you've got these fillets, this OG kind of shape. I used these a fair amount when I was early on making some Chippendale type chest of drawers for base molding, things like that. And then I have this one. This is more of a straight OG curve. Not straight, like it's a reverse OG, but there's no fillet, no flat in the middle. And that works well. You can see how that was the cutter for this edge right here. Sometimes I've used that little undercut for a shelf. So you've got a 3/4 inch shelf. It's the full thickness. But if you undercut with a nice OG shape, you get a little round over and then the cove, and it appears lighter, cleaner, lighter edge. So, but you still have the strength of the 3/4 if you wanted that kind of thing. You notice the difference. You could have your shelf like that, or you could put an OG shape, or any one of those. You could do just a straight cove and just knock the edges off here. So that's one of the things that I do a lot of, is I use just partial aspects of certain cutters. So you don't use the whole cutter necessarily. And let me show you one of those things. So if we took this board and brought it in, like say this is our front edge now, and we want to give it a soft kind of pillowing, but we don't have the right bit for that. So what I often do is get roundovers out, and I'll find the roundover that has enough curve that I can take it from both sides. And if I set like to the top of the bearing, how can I point to that on my pencil? But if I have maybe the bottom of the cutter is almost in the middle of the board, right? Or the bearing is just over halfway. So it'll make a cut there, and then it'll make a cut from the other side, and I'll end up with a soft little curve. So I don't use the whole radius of the cutter. Let me put this in the vise. I'm going to show you how that works. What I was just showing you was a 5/8 bit. I've got a 1/2 inch bit in the router, and I'm going to do that where I come at it from both sides. And let's see if we can get a soft little radius on here. Here we go. See, if you can see from that vantage point, you see how I have it set? I'm only about halfway or so between the bearing and the cutter. I'm going to set it on. Okay, so you can see with just that cutter, it's like as if we had a whole nother cutter. So I would just come in here with a card scraper, and I just lightly hit it and just kind of close that shape like there'd be a little flat in the middle. And then I would take usually I'd start with like 150, but yeah, let's just, a little cushiony pad here. and just sand it and then slightly knock off the edge, top and bottom. Let's take it out and check it out. So there you have quite a difference, right? We've got our regular square edge. You could have a flat edge or this softly radiused edge. See that? We didn't do much. We just used a very partial aspect of a 1/2 inch roundover from both sides and created our own custom. Yeah, you can change out your bearings if you're buying the same brand, especially. There's pretty good uniformity bit to bit, but quite often the threads may not fit into the other bits. So it's nice if you're buying them, you find the same line. If you're getting always white side, you'll find they fit together.
You haven't really talked about cleaning them. Is that something that you do?
I have occasionally, yeah, but what I do more often, I don't know if I still have a can right here. I know there's a lubricant that you can spritz in there and it'll get your bearings going. Sometimes the bearings get a little stiff and they don't go. So I'll just take a little can. I know I've got it over there somewhere. And it just gets it flowing nicely.
That's not that bit cleaning.
No, but bit cleaning, I don't have that. But when I clean the table saw blades, I did a little song. I danced. Oh, grease lightning.
At what point is a router insufficient and you need to move to a shaper?
Oh, good point. A lot of things you can do with a router. In fact, I got away for years doing custom furniture on a router. But when you have larger projects or you need to mill out some stock, a shaper is really the way to go. Especially if you're doing large kind of custom cuts and things, it's nice to have a shaper in the shop. Just the mass of that tool and that it's so dedicated to that center spindle, you get a beautiful smooth cut and it's well worth it. So, but it's only if it warrants the kind of work.
For now.
All right, so let's just do a couple more. I've got some custom cutting bits here. These I had made. So this has a very soft pillowing to it. It's very similar to that Queen Anne bit, but this gave me the pillowing on some larger furniture I did where I used that kind of shape and I would come on both sides like that and I got that kind of nice soft little radius. This is much stronger actually. This was a little bead and cove I had custom made for some Marlboro type legs for some Chippendale furniture, some straight legs. So this gives you the outside bead, then the little cut, and then, well, it's hard to explain. If I could show you the whole thing, you do it from both sides, and it was over, I think it was 1 3/4 inch piece. Ended up working out great. There was just a little cleanup in the middle. This is the cope and stick I was going to tell you about. All right, so here's this cope and stick. So this one, it wasn't technically the cope. I did true mortises, all right, mortise and tenons at the corners. So it came in like this. This was a reproduction. Actually, I got the measurements right off of a library that was built in 1800 in North Carolina, the home of Governor Stone. So you could look that up online. It's in Windsor, North Carolina. And I did like 15 massive bookcases for their collection, but they were copied off of the original bookcases in they call it a mansion. It's like a high ceiling 2-story house, a plantation house like. And the bookcases had this exact molding. And this was the molding it had. Look at this. It has like a raised panel, very subtle. And then it has a bead with a fillet like on both sides. So that was a kind of a complex shape. And so for that, I did a perfect sketch of it and sent it off to have a cutter made. And this is how it looks when it's in the fit. So you had that molding on the inside all around and it was pegged, really substantial. And I built like 15 bookcases for them. And they had double doors on the bottom, each one, so that's 30 of those. And then the upper doors all had the bronze wire, woven wire in there.
They were
so
beautiful.
yeah.
It was Windsor Plantation, right?
Yes.
Am I remembering
Hope
that right?
Plantation in Windsor.
Right.
Yeah. So if you ever get in there for a tour, and you can go to the Heritage Building, I've got a number of pieces in there. These giant corner cupboards that I made with Pug Moore in his shop. And then, I don't know if you can see the library collection, but the bookcases are kind of hidden away. So anyway, let me show you over at the, let's use this again.
Mark says sometimes when routing cherry or hard maple, I'll get some burned sections. It might
Yeah.
just be the hardness of the wood. Any thoughts on avoiding that problem?
Yeah, that's a common problem.
Said it was
Mark.
a good sharp bit that he used. So
Yeah, it actually has more to do with the pitch in the wood. In some woods, I think, are just of that density that they heat and burn rapidly. So cherry being a closed grain wood and having that little pitch in there, it'll do that, it'll burn. So what I do is I work my way up to the final cut if possible, so that you're not taking your full cut and you leave just a little bit that you can skim off at the end. And by that time, you've already gotten some reps like going around. So you can go, all right, this last pass, I know I got to move, keep it moving to reduce or eliminate the amount of burn I get. So I always try to move faster. That's the key to it. But you don't want to move faster, taking off a lot of material. So you just leave that last bit and you skin off that last bit, just moving a little faster. All right. So that's sharp bit as well. And climb cut if you can, but it'll still can burn there. All right. So check it out. This is my custom bit. So I had this ground. This is that bearing, that outline of the raised panel. But this is on the vertical. So rather than have this big wide wing cutter flying for a raised panel, which you can get them that way, you can also cut a raised panel vertically like this. Now, if I did that, I would be taking the whole cut. So what you want to do is move it over and just take it in several cuts. So I'm going to just set it right there. I'm going to turn this on. I'll make a couple little cuts. I'll only do a short section of this so you can see what it looks like. Here we go. Turn on the dust collector. So there you have it. We've got a nice little round over there. We've got our bead, turn that off, and our raised panel, that slight raised panel. And I had it made so that there's a flat at the bottom so it would fit nicely into our groove. So here it is again, the actual final same cut. I haven't used that for quite a while. But it's nice to have it vertical like that, safer, easier to use. Yeah, you got to do multiple passes, but you can keep the speed higher too because it's not quite as large. A couple other little bits I have here. The famous dovetail bit that we used on a number of projects. We use this on our candle stand project using this box. This jig, if you haven't made the candle stand and you like this one, this is the candle stand. It's not yet turned, but all the joinery is done. And so this kind of dovetail bit is wonderful for making sliding dovetails. And we did that exercise. I know quite a number of you have done that on here. And so all of these are dovetailed in sliding. So if I push on this, we can remove and see that channel. It's perfect for this bit. So this is a white side, 3/4 inch diameter at the wider point. And it's used in conjunction with this jig. So the column is clamped in there and everything's parallel and true, and it allows you to cut a beautiful slot in one pass. And then the same bit is used in the router table now, and you just adjust the fence coming from both sides and do these little micro passes until it's just right and you can fit it into the column. I mean, it's a beautiful, perfect fit. So this is where specialty bits like router bits like this can be used effectively in certain cases where it's a lot of time to cut them by hand. And even by hand, you're not going to get that kind of fit and that kind of glue surface. So that's a nice bit. And then this other specialty bit, this is, if you're doing those slab tables, we don't do a lot of that around here, but we did that night when we did that giant cookie, the ash tree that I had out back. We planed that down. We had a couple rails and we went across. We could put a link to that video if people want to see it. But at that night, I don't think I had this, but this is the white side 6220. It's, they often call it, what do they call that? It's like the sacrificial board at the bottom of a CNC machine. It's just every now and then you need to skim plane that to clean it up again for your CNC. There's a word for that board. Anyway, they use this on CNC machines to plane flat because it's got a nice flat cutter there, but they're wonderful for flattening slabs as well. Because it's a 2-inch diameter, you spend a lot fewer passes. 4 times as fast as that.
Spoiler board?
Spoiler board, thank you. Yeah, that's what I was trying to think of. Yeah, so there you have it. That works great. The other bit I was going to show you was a mortising bit for putting in hinges, but I've shown that, and you can check that out in the hanging cabinet video where we do the flat cabinet. We actually did that on a Shop Night Live. So if you want to look at more videos, I used a special little mortising bit. Let me just show it to you. I won't do the cut right now, but here's the cutter. So it's a little 1/2-inch diameter with a bearing on top. What's so great about that is that it's a flush cut bearing, you know, so it's in line with that cutter. So if you just make a jig that's exactly the size of your, so you make this jig using the actual hinge that you're going to use, okay, the size of the leaf. You just butt these pieces right up against it and then tack them to get to the jig, and that's a perfect fit for that hinge. And then you come in, this gets, well, I'll show you on this side, I did a little trial basis. This gets clamped to this board. You come in with your router, and now the bearing, you set the depth to the thickness of the hinge, and so the bearing is riding against this pattern, which is the exact same size as your hinge. So then when you pop it out, you just chop out the corners cleanly, and you can then, your hinge just fits in there like a glove. I mean, look at that. It's flush, it's perfect, just because you have that little bearing on top. So this is a wonderful aid for insetting certain situations like this, especially where you have a lot of them. You may want to cut them by hand. Some situations call for that. And then of course you have wing cutters as well. We didn't get into that, but that you can do tongue and groove, just slot cutters, you know, splines. It's pretty handy for a lot of applications. Well, thank you all so much. If you enjoyed that content, please consider subscribing and sharing and liking and making a comment if you like.
Yes.
And also remember, over at epicwoodworking.com, we've got lots of other opportunities. I've been mentioning a few times the projects over there. You'd love to see that. And if you're not on our mailing list, it's great to be on there if you want to hear about new opportunities coming up. So on behalf of the camera lady and myself, thanks again for being here. We look forward to seeing you next time.